Catherine will speak on my behalf. Mrs. Meghan Markle has repeatedly written to the palace seeking our intervention in the Epstein matter, but, like Andrew, she must face her own consequences.
The decision arrived without ceremony, warning, or room for negotiation. One signature from Prince William severed the final financial thread still connecting Meghan to the palace, closing an arrangement she believed remained protected from royal retaliation. When the message reached her, the Duchess did not argue. She simply stared at the wording, read the final sentence again, and realized this was not another temporary restriction. It was permanent, and William had personally authorized it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Meghan sat through the morning meeting without touching the coffee beside her. The notice described the palace-administered financial facility, a private arrangement that had covered security coordination, administrative costs, and expenses tied to royal obligations after she and Harry stepped back from official duties. That facility mattered because it was the final practical link between her household and the crown, not another line in an account. She read the notice twice, pressed the page flat with both hands, and asked, "Did William approve this himself?" Her advisor answered yes. The prince had signed an order ending every crown-backed payment, reimbursement, guarantee, and form of administrative support connected to her household. Meghan stayed silent. She understood something colder than anger. The palace no longer regarded her as financially connected to the institution in any form. Harry reacted differently. He paced across the room, called the move punishment, and insisted his brother had turned a family wound into policy. The Duke saw revenge. Meghan saw design. She knew the arrangement had survived earlier funding cuts because it came from an older royal understanding, one that had never been formally cancelled. Someone had now decided to close that gap forever. The final clauses sharpened the blow. The termination took effect immediately, which meant the order had been prepared before Meghan knew of the review. No transition period appeared. No final consultation had been offered. Then came the sentence that changed her expression completely. No appeal would be accepted through palace channels. William had not paused the arrangement. He had built the decision to resist reversal. Meghan's shock hardened when another detail emerged. The order followed a private review involving William, Catherine, and a sealed financial record she had never been permitted to examine. Catherine's presence suggested the future king had not acted in isolation, while the hidden file raised a dangerous question about what the palace believed it had discovered. But the true force of William's decision could not be understood through numbers alone, because behind the cancelled payments stood two people whose battle with the monarchy had become painfully personal. For William, the order was presented as discipline. For Meghan, it felt like erasure. Their conflict had moved far beyond family disagreements, newspaper headlines, or damaged trust. Money had become the final language of royal belonging, and by removing it, the future king was delivering a message no private conversation could soften. Yet the deepest pain belonged to Harry, trapped between the brother who signed the order and the wife forced to absorb it. William stood alone before the next palace meeting, repeating the phrase, "institutional separation," under his breath. The term meant a complete break between Meghan's household and the monarchy's official financial system, but he knew the words would never sound neutral to her. The prince had taken on greater responsibility for protecting royal finances, public trust, and the future structure of the crown, as King Charles stepped back from the most painful family disputes. To him, the arrangement had become a risk. To Meghan, it was proof that the palace still accepted unfinished duties toward her and Harry. Meghan turned to her husband and spoke with frightening calm. She told Harry they could survive the financial loss, rebuild the missing support, and pay every future cost themselves. What she could not accept was the humiliation of receiving the decision through formal wording instead of a family conversation. The Duchess had not been warned by William. She had not been contacted by Charles. She had simply been informed that the final connection was over. Harry paced across the room, defending his wife, while wrestling with a truth he did not want to face. He believed his brother might genuinely think he was protecting the monarchy, and that possibility made the betrayal feel worse. The Duke could condemn the order, but he could not dismiss William as careless. The future king had considered the consequences and signed it anyway. Catherine had warned him during a private conversation that Meghan would see the cutoff as final exile. The princess urged him to consider a gradual reduction, a 6-month transition, or a quiet settlement that would prevent another public family crisis. William refused every softer option. He told her uncertainty was causing more damage than finality, and leaving one small financial bridge open only guaranteed that the same conflict would return. Meghan reached into a leather folder later that night and removed the last palace contact card she still carried. She tore it once through the middle, placed both pieces on the table, and told Harry she would never ask the royal household for assistance again. He watched her, then admitted something he had withheld. One palace encounter months earlier may have triggered William's decision. That encounter had seemed restrained at the time, but those who understood its meaning later recognized it as the moment William stopped considering compromise. The break did not begin with a public speech or a dramatic palace announcement. It began behind a closed door during a private financial review at Windsor, when Meghan challenged the authority of William's office to examine an arrangement created before he controlled it. The conversation lasted less than 20 minutes. No voices were raised. Yet one sentence changed the future of the relationship, and when the Duchess left the room, the prince quietly ordered a complete review of every remaining connection. William entered the meeting already under pressure. The palace had begun examining historic financial arrangements, meaning old commitments, unclear obligations, and expenses still connected to people no longer carrying out official royal duties. That review mattered because every surviving agreement carried money, authority, and risk into the monarchy's future. Meghan believed the discussion concerned routine updates. She did not expect the arrangement itself to be placed in danger. Meghan joined remotely and listened as palace officials questioned costs linked to security, administration, and family obligations. She felt cornered almost immediately. The Duchess argued that those expenses had never been optional and accused the institution of rewriting promises after the fact. William remained controlled, but each answer made the distance between them sharper. Then came the sentence, "No one forgot." During the Windsor Financial Review, a private examination of royal money and responsibility, Meghan told William that the arrangement existed under the authority of King Charles and could not be altered by a future reign that had not yet begun. The words landed with quiet force. She meant to defend an agreement created before his control. He heard something else, a direct challenge to his authority, and a warning that she viewed the arrangement as protection against his future leadership. William did not raise his voice. He closed the financial file, removed his glasses, and looked toward the officials beside him. "Then we must decide whether this arrangement belongs in the future at all," he said. Meghan understood the threat immediately. She ended the meeting believing the prince had crossed from review into retaliation. Yet the real decision came only after she disconnected. William asked every official to remain seated. He ordered them to identify the legal mechanism, the formal process required to end the arrangement permanently, and he instructed them to examine every surviving financial link tied to Meghan's household. The prince had stopped asking whether changes were needed. He was now asking how quickly they could be completed. Charles later received a written summary of the meeting. The king read Meghan's words, read his son's response, and declined to block the review. His silence gave William the freedom to proceed. When Meghan learned that he had personally led the process, she demanded a direct conversation. The financial order had been prepared in silence, but the emotions behind it could no longer remain hidden once Meghan and William finally faced one another without carefully written statements between them. When Meghan finally spoke to William, she did not ask him to restore the money. She demanded to know why he had chosen humiliation over honesty. The prince listened without interruption, his expression fixed, until she accused him of using royal finances to punish a woman who had challenged the palace. That accusation shattered the restraint between them. What followed was not a negotiation between relatives. It was a collision between two people defending completely different versions of justice. Meghan had requested the conversation through Harry because she refused to argue with financial officials who could not explain the motive behind the order. She wanted the person who signed it to defend it directly. William agreed to a private video call with no aides, lawyers, or palace secretaries present. That mattered because palace secretaries are senior staff who normally control sensitive royal communication. Without them, there was no shield between the family members and no careful language to soften the anger. Meghan looked at him and asked whether he had enjoyed signing the order. William paused, placed both hands on the desk, and answered that enjoyment had nothing to do with responsibility. The prince said the arrangement had survived only because no one before him had been willing to make a final decision. He added that endless royal support could not continue, while the institution itself remained under repeated attack. Meghan fired back. She accused him of turning family pain into administrative punishment, and told him the monarchy had always hidden cruelty behind formal wording. The Duchess insisted the palace had encouraged informal requests for years, instead of creating clear limits. She denied trying to misuse the facility, and said every request had been tied to security, family obligations, or costs the crown once accepted. William then revealed what had hardened his position. A documented financial review showed repeated attempts to expand the original arrangement beyond its intended limits, including broader protection and international expense coverage. The future king said those requests proved the facility was no longer contained. Meghan answered that the palace had created the confusion, then blamed her for using the system it had designed. Harry entered midway through the exchange and told his brother that cutting Meghan off financially meant cutting him off too. The Duke's voice tightened as he accused William of pretending the order was only about policy. The prince replied that family connection and financial obligation were no longer the same thing. William finally said the order would stand. Meghan reached forward and ended the call before he could offer a personal goodbye. With the confrontation over, attention shifted toward the king, because Charles now had to choose between protecting an old promise and supporting the son preparing to inherit his power. King Charles did not sign the order, but his silence made it possible. For years, he had allowed the financial arrangement to survive, because ending it meant confronting Harry, Meghan, and his own sense of guilt. William had now done what his father repeatedly postponed. When the termination file reached the king, he held the power to stop it. Instead, he read every page, set down his pen, and allowed the deadline to pass. Charles still held the highest authority inside the monarchy, yet he had increasingly allowed William to shape decisions involving royal money and the future structure of the working family. The working monarchy meant the smaller group of royals who carried out official duties and received institutional support. That shift mattered, because the prince was not only preparing to inherit the crown, he was already being trusted to make choices that would define what remained protected and what would be cut away. The king opened the file alone and paused when he reached Meghan's name. He then turned to a handwritten note from Harry, asking him not to let family ties disappear behind palace procedure. Charles read the sentence twice. The message struck at the guilt he had carried for years, but it also reopened the frustration he could no longer ignore. Every compromise had created another argument. Every attempt to preserve peace had only delayed the next confrontation. Camilla urged him not to reverse William publicly. The Queen Consort warned that overruling the future king would weaken the authority he was being prepared to exercise. She reminded Charles that his son had accepted responsibility for a decision no one else had wanted to make. If the monarch blocked him now, William would appear powerful only when his choices were easy. Catherine delivered an even harder truth during a private conversation. She told Charles that William saw the order as a test of whether the monarchy could finally separate personal guilt from institutional responsibility. The princess said the prince believed the crown could not keep funding uncertainty simply because the family feared another emotional rupture. Charles then discovered the detail that settled the matter. Continuing the arrangement would require his personal authorization every year. That meant the same dispute would return again and again, forcing him to choose between Harry and William each time. The deadline approached. Charles reached toward the telephone, stopped with his hand above it, then slowly pulled away. He made no call. He requested no exceptional review, the special process that could have paused the order. The king's silence settled the argument inside the palace. But across the Atlantic, that same silence triggered an immediate chain of losses Meghan could no longer dismiss as symbolic. The first sign came before breakfast. A routine request sent through Meghan's office was returned with a single line, stating that palace authorization had expired. Then another service was withdrawn. A security liaison stopped responding. An administrative contact confirmed that no future reimbursements would be processed. Within hours, the abstract language of William's order became brutally real. The Duchess was no longer standing at the edge of royal life. Every remaining financial door had been closed, locked, and removed from her reach. Meghan sat at the kitchen table while her business manager listed what had disappeared. Palace-managed reimbursements had ended. Legacy administrative support, the old system that handled unresolved royal expenses after she left official duties, was gone. Financial guarantees had been withdrawn, and security coordination would now need to be arranged and paid for privately. Each loss created new pressure, because those channels had connected her household to trusted contacts, established procedures, and faster protection during sensitive travel. The Duchess remained controlled until her manager repeated the words, "effective permanently." Her expression changed. Meghan and Harry were financially independent in public terms, but that did not make the disruption meaningless. The sudden cutoff forced them to rebuild systems that had existed for years, while also proving that the palace wanted no responsibility left between them. Meghan felt less frightened by the cost than enraged by the message. Her years inside the royal family had been reduced to an account being formally closed. The institution had not called to explain. William had not offered a final conversation. Charles had allowed the deadline to pass. To her, the silence said they wanted the separation to feel absolute. Harry blamed himself almost immediately. He admitted that he had believed his father would intervene at the final moment, even if only to create a short transition. The Duke had treated the arrangement as the last practical link to his family, and now that link had vanished under his brother's signature. Meghan slid the palace notice toward him. "Your father had his chance," she said. Harry looked down and could not answer. The second notice made the blow even harder. Future requests could not be submitted under Meghan's title or Harry's former royal office, the old palace structure that once managed his official duties. Quiet restoration was no longer possible. Their advisors also discovered that several departments had been informed before Meghan received the final letter. The cutoff had been coordinated to take effect instantly. Meghan began preparing a public response filled with anger. Yet later that night, a private conversation with Harry changed her decision. Anger had driven Meghan through the first hours of the crisis. But in the quiet that followed, she and Harry were forced to decide whether they would keep fighting for a connection the palace had already declared dead. That night, there were no advisors, palace officials, or carefully rehearsed statements. Meghan and Harry sat alone with the termination notice between them and confronted a truth both had resisted. Every attempt to preserve a partial royal connection had kept them emotionally trapped inside the institution they had left. Harry wanted to call his father one final time. Meghan stopped him not out of pride, but because she had decided that asking the palace to reconsider would surrender the only power they still possessed. Meghan's communications team had already prepared a forceful public statement accusing the palace of financial retaliation and selective punishment. The language was sharp, direct, and designed to expose the decision before royal advisors could define it first. That statement mattered, because once released, it would turn a private financial cutoff into another open war between two households already divided by years of distrust. Harry still believed there was another path. He argued that a direct appeal to Charles could produce a private compromise, even after the deadline had passed. The king remained his father before he was the monarch, and the Duke clung to the hope that one honest conversation could reopen a door William had closed. Meghan answered with quiet certainty. She told her husband she would never again ask William for money, recognition, or administrative protection. The Duchess said the surviving arrangement had not preserved family. It had preserved dependency, suspicion, and repeated disappointment. Every payment carried another reminder that the palace could change the terms whenever it chose. Harry finally admitted what he had hidden for years. He had believed one remaining royal connection might eventually lead him back to his father and brother. The Duke had treated that financial link as proof that reconciliation was still possible. Meghan told him the connection had done the opposite. It had kept them waiting for acceptance that never came. Harry picked up his phone and searched for Charles's number. Meghan placed her hand gently over his. Neither spoke. After several long seconds, he turned the phone face down and left it untouched. Meghan then rejected the aggressive statement. Instead, she authorized a brief declaration confirming that the separation had been accepted and that every future cost would be handled independently. Her refusal to attack the palace caught William's advisors off guard. They had prepared detailed responses for accusations that never came. For the first time, the cutoff looked less like Meghan's defeat and more like the final severing of a bond that had controlled both sides. What began as a private royal order now moved into public judgment, where William's authority and Meghan's silence would be interpreted by millions in completely different ways. By sunrise, the decision belonged to the world. Broadcasters called it the final financial divorce between Meghan and the monarchy. Newspapers framed William as either a disciplined future king or an unforgiving brother willing to weaponize palace power. Yet the most powerful reaction did not come from a studio. It unfolded outside Buckingham Palace, where two groups gathered beneath the same gates, one applauding the cutoff, the other holding signs accusing the crown of abandoning family in the name of control. The story spread because this was no longer being treated as another temporary royal dispute. Palace commentators described it as the definitive end of Meghan's institutional relationship with the crown, meaning every official financial and administrative connection had now been removed. That distinction mattered. A temporary suspension could be reversed. A permanent separation carried a far colder message. The monarchy had decided there was nothing left to preserve. The public split almost immediately. William's supporters argued that royal money must serve working royals, the family members who perform official duties on behalf of the crown. Meghan's defenders saw something different. To them, financial accountability had become a cover for personal retaliation, and the future king had used palace authority to settle a family conflict. One major newspaper captured the divide with a front-page headline, "The Final Cut." The main image showed William leaving a royal engagement, while a smaller photograph carried Meghan's withdrawn expression. The contrast was brutal. His side looked firm and controlled. Her side looked isolated. Outside Buckingham Palace, supporters of the prince chanted that public royal money should not follow people who had left official life. Across from them, Meghan's defenders raised a handwritten banner reading, "Family should not be cancelled by signature." The words traveled faster than the palace statement itself. William saw the front page inside a palace car and looked away without comment. The prince had wanted clarity, but the decision had deepened the public fracture he claimed to be ending. Harry watched the coverage and grew angry when commentators described Meghan as financially defeated. The Duke insisted her silence was not surrender, it was refusal. Palace officials then released a short confirmation stating that the arrangement had ended permanently. No secret talks were underway. No reinstatement was being considered. Yet Meghan's restrained statement gained unexpected sympathy because it contained no accusation, demand, or attack, only acceptance and complete independence. The headlines would eventually fade, but the emotional verdict could only be found beyond the cheering crowds, inside the final choices made by the people whose bond had now been severed beyond repair. In the end, William achieved exactly what he intended. The monarchy's last financial obligation to Meghan was gone. The accounts were closed, and the future structure of the crown had been made unmistakably clear. Yet victory did not bring relief. It brought silence. Meghan was finally free from palace control, but also from every protection and connection that arrangement represented. The prince had defended the institution he would inherit, while permanently sacrificing another piece of the family he once hoped could be repaired. Meghan gathered the final palace correspondence and placed it inside a closed storage box. She paused before setting it aside, but there was no rage left in her expression. Only sadness. The cutoff remained fully in force, with no secret appeal, replacement fund, private reimbursement, or palace-backed support available to her. Every royal administrative system the network once used to manage official expenses, contacts, and approvals had been removed from her future. Meghan and Harry began reorganizing their finances independently. They replaced old palace channels, created new security arrangements, and removed the crown from every long-term plan. The Duchess understood that the decision had been designed to weaken her connection to the monarchy. Yet it also ended something she had grown tired of carrying: the endless wait for approval from people who no longer trusted her. Harry reached a harder conclusion. He accepted that preserving small institutional links had never preserved the family itself. The Duke had treated those connections as bridges to Charles and William, but they had only delayed the moment when he had to face how deep the separation had become. His final link to home had not saved reconciliation. It had kept hope alive, long after trust had disappeared. William received written confirmation that every account had been closed. He read the message, dismissed his aides, and remained alone. The prince had achieved administrative success, but he could not pretend it repaired the personal loss. His decision revealed the kind of king he might become: disciplined, decisive, and prepared to choose institutional survival over family sentiment. Charles carried his own burden. The king's refusal to intervene confirmed that real influence was moving toward his son. But it also meant he had allowed another family bond to collapse in silence. This was not Meghan's financial destruction. It was the completion of a separation both sides had resisted. William gained clarity. Meghan gained independence. Harry lost the final bridge he believed still connected him to home. The last palace financial tie ended not with reconciliation, but with acceptance. The crown moved forward without Meghan, and she moved forward without the crown. What remained was no longer obligation, dependency, or unfinished business, only the permanent memory of a family that chose distance over repair. The signature closed the account, the silence closed the relationship, and from that moment forward, neither Meghan nor the monarchy could claim that anything between them remained unresolved. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.